Hey guys. Tonight we whisper through velvet and parchment, but not the kind that makes declarations or poetry. No, tonight we fold ourselves into a bedchamber where even sleep is political. You lie beneath heavy canopies embroidered with peacocks and imperial suns, surrounded by shadows that smell faintly of jasmine and old ink. You think this room belongs to a queen, but the most important thing inside isn't the marble basin or the gilded incense burner. It's the crinkled, half-concealed papyrus tucked under your pillow. Not a love letter, not a bedtime psalm. It's legal proof that you're still who you say you are, and that no one can rewrite your story while you rest. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Palace rules say we don't sleep alone tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's strange, isn't it, that someone could fall asleep in a golden bed and still fear waking up erased? But that's Byzantium for you, a place where what's written down matters more than what's whispered, wept, or even witnessed. And tonight, you're her, the woman everyone calls lucky, beloved, untouchable. You wear pearls in your hair and gold-stitched slippers, but none of it matters as much as what's curled beneath your cheekbone right now. A scrap of law that says you're still the emperor's wife, or his concubine, or maybe the legal guardian of his third daughter's future dowry. Honestly, it changes weekly, because here's what no one tells you about palace women: you don't rise by beauty, charm, or kindness. You rise by documentation. You win by clauses and counterseals. Even your smiles are notarized, your pregnancy's notarized, your silence is notarized, and if you ever forget that, someone else will remember it for you. A eunuch with cold hands, a cousin who needs your room, a scribe who copies faster when frightened. So you learn early. The moment you enter the palace, they hand you silk robes with sleeves too long and contracts even longer. You learn that the safest place to hide something isn't a drawer or a box. It's under your pillow. Next to your breathing, your body becomes the archive. Your sleep, the last vault no one can pick. Which is ironic, really, because every night you go to bed praying no one tries. Tonight, your chamber smells of lamp oil, rose water, and wet parchment. It rained earlier, and your scroll case was damp when they brought it. You dried it on the coals. Not ideal, but at least the ink didn't run. Or maybe it did. You haven't checked the bottom half yet, but your name is intact. That's all that matters. Because names are fragile here, and yours is already a negotiation. You were born Irene, then renamed Irene in Greek, then consort designate when the emperor noticed you in the Orange Garden, and finally imperial mistress unranked on your first document, an awkward phrase that sounds more like a military title than anything else. Still, you keep that title under your pillow, because titles can be upgraded, and ashes cannot. You've seen it happen. There was a girl before you, beautiful, quick-witted, even taught herself Latin just to please the emperor's secretary, but she forgot to sleep with her registration document. One morning, her bed was empty, and her name was removed from the scriptorium's records. People claimed she left voluntarily. You know better. You heard the guards dragging someone down the eastern corridor at dawn. There are rules to this game. You must fold your documents in 4. Never 8, it creases the seal. You must wrap them in blue linen if you're married, yellow if engaged, and black if widowed. You sleep on the side closest to the window, so any fire or break-in hits you first, but that way, you can also jump out faster. You don't use cedar drawers for hiding things. Everyone checks those first. You use laundry baskets, inner sleeves, the hem of your third cloak, and always, you check the corners of your paper for knife marks, tiny slits made by eunuchs paid to swap originals for forgeries. You start to recognize the weight of legitimacy by the texture of the papyrus. Smooth means safe. Crinkled means contested. Slightly waxy. Probably still under review. Every fold becomes familiar. Each crease a lover's fingerprint. Except colder. There's even a pattern to the paranoia. You check your pillow twice before sleeping. Once more after your maid leaves. One last time before you close your eyes, and sometimes at midnight. You wake up without knowing why and whisper the first line of your legal clause aloud like a prayer. Let it be known that Irene, by imperial favor and public decree. Even your dreams begin to blur into contracts. You dream of a quill floating above your bed, of a judge's seal stamped onto your thigh, of a child being born with a scroll for a spine. Historians still argue whether palace women were truly literate or simply memorized key passages like poetry. You know the answer? Literacy wasn't optional, it was armor. The prettiest girl in the palace could still vanish unless she could read the sentence that made her real. You remember one evening, during a thunderstorm, when a new concubine was brought in, a girl barely 16, wide-eyed, terrified. She didn't know she had to carry her ownership scroll herself, thought someone would keep it for her. She left it in the bathhouse, tucked in her robes. That night, it disappeared. By morning, so had she. The official story was that she was sent to a countryside convent for temperament training. But you've heard that phrase before. It means they found someone better and needed your room. Still, you can't help but laugh sometimes. There's something absurd about the whole thing. You, curled up like a child, clutching paperwork like it's a bedtime plushie. Maybe you even talk to it. Stay with me. You whisper, don't let anyone alter you. Sometimes you imagine the scroll whispering back, only if the ink holds. You once saw an older empress slip a forged document into her slipper, laughed like it was a game, said her greatest romance wasn't with the emperor, but with the law. She outlived 3 husbands. Her slippers were full of parchment. She died peacefully, they said, but her feet were ink-stained. Byzantium has many kinds of women. Some rule, some rot, and some, like you, survive in a halfway space, neither beloved nor discarded, but pending approval. You're not naive. You know one rainstorm, one ink blot, one clever lie could undo you. But for now, you sleep. The scroll crinkles softly as you exhale. You tuck it beneath your jawbone like a secret. You wrap your body around it, knowing it's colder than a man but more faithful. And just before sleep claims you, you whisper, let it be known. You wake to the faintest rustle parchment shifting under your cheek. Not a sound exactly, more like the idea of a sound. The candles are stubs now, soft puddles of wax on bronze saucers, and outside the lattice, the wind fingers the lemon trees like a curious thief. It's early. The palace is hushed, in that pre-dawn moment when even ambition sleeps. But your mind doesn't. You stretch one arm out into the coolness and feel the edge of the document where it slipped toward the floor. Reflexively, you pull it back. If it's missing when they check, you're not a woman anymore. You're a liability. And liabilities in the imperial palace vanish, often under the pretext of moral purification. They might say you retired to a convent. They might say you took ill. But everyone will know your paperwork didn't hold. It's no romantic exaggeration to say that the woman most treasured by the emperor often sleeps alone. Legally speaking, her body may be close to his, her fragrance stirred into his pillows, but she lies with only one companion she truly trusts, the clause that defines her presence here. You're not dreaming this. The law follows you into the bedchamber. You can trace its logic across the folds of your sheets, see its footnotes in the shadows behind the curtain, even as you breathe. Your legitimacy is a negotiation. The women who forget that don't last. He said he loved you. You said nothing. You had your notary say it for you. 3 witnesses signed the parchment. His name appears in deep violet ink, just above yours. That color was reserved for the imperial household. Only those who bled purple were allowed to use it. That's why you asked for it. He laughed at your request, but he granted it. That was power. In its purest, quietest form, not the kiss, not the jewelry, but that inch of authority you wrestled from his inkpot. And still, you sleep alone, not physically. Perhaps he visits sometimes, but emotionally, politically, existentially, you're on your own. Because in this palace, affection is no substitute for legality. Everyone adores someone. Everyone touches someone. But only the documented survive. You've seen too many favorites reduced to ghost stories, cautionary tales whispered over bathwater. She didn't get her promise in writing, someone mutters, as if that's the true sin. You learn to file your emotions like you do your documents categorically. alphabetically, with backup copies. You cry only when you're sure your scrolls are dry. You trust only those whose sleeves are too tight to hide a dagger or a forged signature. You're not paranoid. You're procedural. There's a difference. In the harem, love isn't a verb. It's a contract, a ledger line, a sealed promise that no one else can override. You lie next to the emperor, but you don't ask him to love you. You ask him to sign. And when he does, you hide it, not in the obvious place, like the cedar chest. No, you sew it into the lining of your nightdress. You press it between layers of rose-scented cloth and lay it beneath your body. Sometimes you think it hears your heartbeat. Other times, you wonder if it has one of its own. Once, you nearly lost everything to a legal nuance. The clause had been copied incorrectly. The scribe wrote temporary concubinage instead of semi-permanent consort. A single word. That was all. The difference between a palace suite and a broom closet. Between your name on the ceremonial tapestry and your name scratched out from the official diary. You confronted the scribe. He was old, apologetic, smelled of wine and incense, said his hand trembled. You paid him to tremble again this time, into correction, but you never forgot the lesson. Even devotion is a risk if it's undocumented. Now, some might say this obsession with paperwork is excessive, that it strips love of its spontaneity, its mystery. But those people have never watched a woman be carried out at dawn because a seal was missing. They've never heard the thud of boots on mosaic floors while pretending to sleep, eyes open in the dark. They've never known that one unregistered evening can undo 3 years of obedience. The mystery is not romantic. The mystery is lethal. And so, your document sleeps with you, not beside you, with you. It is your blanket, your guard, your silent witness. Sometimes, when you wake in the night, you reach for it before you reach for water. You unfold it in the dark, your fingers familiar with every line. You don't need light to read it anymore. The words have etched themselves into your skin, like a second language of survival. This woman, by consent and decree, shall remain within the protective confines of the inner court, with privileges of, you stop there. You always stop there, because that part has the clause, the one that keeps you breathing. There's another woman here, Theodota, the emperor's former lover. She had everything beauty, grace, poems written about her. But one thing she didn't have was a signature. She trusted his promises, not his handwriting. When he tired of her, she was reassigned to a religious estate outside Nicomedia. They said it was peaceful. She said nothing, no letters, no farewells, just gone. Some say she poisoned herself. Others say she became a nun. You know what really happened. She lost the document war. Historians still argue whether women in the palace had any true power. Some say they were pawns. Others call them players. The truth? You're both. You're the piece and the player. The blade and the wound. And the only thing between you and exile is one sheet of paper written in a language most people pretend to understand. There's a joke that circulates in the bathhouses. Don't fall asleep with a man. Fall asleep with a monk who knows how to spell. You laugh, then you stop laughing. Because it's true. The monks control the ink, and the ink controls the future. And you're just a girl with excellent penmanship and a deeply suspicious nature. Sometimes you imagine burning your document just see what would happen. Would the palace walls collapse? Would the emperor even notice? Would you suddenly vanish? Erased like a miswritten date? Probably not, but maybe, and the maybe is what keeps you up at night. Still, there's comfort here, a strange kind of intimacy, not with the emperor, not even with the other women, but with the document itself. You know its smell: aged parchment, beeswax, the faintest trace of clove oil. You know its creases, its margins, its mistakes. It knows you, too. Holds your secrets, your ambitions, your name. So tonight, again, you fold it carefully, press it against your ribs, lie down with the curtains drawn and the incense still smoking. Somewhere, a lute plays a minor scale. Somewhere, a monk sharpens his quill. But here, in this room, you are whole. You are written. You are real. And if tomorrow comes with fire or knives or sweet words meant to unmake you, well, let them come. You're not afraid of danger. You're afraid of edits. By morning, the harem stirs like a pot just beginning to bubble. Silk shoes whisper against mosaic floors, and somewhere near the kitchens, a servant girl drops a copper bowl that clatters like a sword hitting marble. But you don't rise immediately. You stay in bed a moment longer, fingers curled not around the edge of the blanket, but around the warm stiffness of the document you've kept all night beneath your shoulder blade. It hasn't moved. That's good. One of the junior consorts lost her protection scroll last week, slipped behind a chest, she claimed, and she now eats meals in silence. Her name replaced by a cold nickname the other girls chant in the baths. She who forgot. It could be you. It almost was you. Once. Back when you believed affection could replace administration. That was before your first tea ceremony with the elder wives, before they passed you a thin wafer of paper under a slice of melon and said, "Eat this last. It's the only thing that lasts." You laugh now, quietly, because they were right. The paper lasted, even when everything else changed, when your title shifted, when the emperor's interest flickered, when the junior eunuchs started delivering your letters slower than before. The document still holds. Still says you are more than a guest, more than an ornament. You are a legally recognized presence in this building. They can dress you in lavender and pearls all they want, but without your signature, your furniture. With it, you're a clause they can't ignore. Not yet. You finally rise. The robe they left you today is embroidered with small doves, likely a passive-aggressive nod to your status: gentle, ornamental, replaceable. You ignore the symbolism. You have bigger things to consider. You slip the document into the false seam inside your sleeve, then adjust your outer robe so that the stiffness doesn't show. You've done this so many times you could do it blindfolded. Maybe you have once, during one of the many surprise inspections meant to ensure compliance with inner court decorum. That's what they call them. What they really are is a search for evidence of pregnancy, of letters, of unapproved contracts. One girl got caught with a love note hidden in her hair comb. She was married off to a noble in Trebizond within the week. They called it a promotion. She cried until the gate shut behind her. Today, they're summoning everyone to the garden court for an announcement. That usually means one of two things. Either a new bride has arrived, or an old one has failed. You can't tell which you prefer. A new arrival might bring competition, but failure means the walls are closing in, and soon it might be your name, they whisper. As you walk toward the courtyard, you pass the tapestry hall, where the faces of former consorts hang like ancestors, smiling, serene, and mostly forgotten. You scan their eyes, wondering which of them slept with the document and which of them didn't, which ones loved and which ones simply survived. In the garden, the women are already assembling, arranged by rank like a living chessboard. You slide into your place third row, not too close to the Empress, but not far enough to be invisible. It's a coveted position. You earned it the way all things are earned here, carefully, strategically, and with 3 stamped seals. You glance around. Theodora, the newest favorite, stands 2 rows ahead, resplendent in emerald. She's young, foolish. You've seen the way she leans into the Emperor's laughter without a second thought. You wonder if she knows where her contract is. You wonder if she has one. The announcement is dull. A niece has been married to a Bulgarian prince. There will be a banquet. That's all. But even dull news is dangerous here. Banquets mean performances. Performances mean visibility. Visibility means risk. You'll need to review your scroll tonight, just to be sure the phrasing still protects you in front of the foreign envoys. Sometimes, the language shifts without warning. What was once primary consort candidate becomes honorary guest in a single overwritten line. And unless you catch it, you won't even know you're fading until you're gone. The harem disperses in polite, calculated waves. You linger behind, pretending to admire a cluster of peonies. Really, you're watching the eunuchs. One of them carries a small scroll case unlabeled. That's unusual. Most documents are heavily marked, coded by rank, purpose, and secrecy. An unmarked scroll could be anything: a birth registration, a reassignment, a will, or worse, a nullification. The eunuch sees you watching and smiles thinly. You smile back. It's a game, after all. You both know what's at stake. Back in your chambers, you unseal the document again. The ink has held. That's good. You trace the imperial insignia with your finger. Some women trace icons of saints. You trace bureaucracy. It's almost a prayer. May this clause remain unchallenged. May this date remain unaltered. May this seal remain unbroken. It's not poetic, but it's effective. You've never been much for poetry anyway. Too easy to misinterpret, too little legal weight. There was once a woman, Eudokia, who tried to have her scroll embroidered onto silk, thinking it would be more beautiful that way. The monks refused to copy it, said silk absorbed ink poorly, said it was unseemly to turn the law into fashion. She persisted. They finally obliged. Weeks later, the emperor annulled her contract, citing inappropriate self-display. Historians still argue whether that was coincidence or punishment. You don't argue. You fold your parchment and return it to its rightful place, far from sunlight, far from sentiment. It's strange how little things can unravel an empire. A smudge, a misspelled name, a misplaced date. You once found an error in your own document. The name of your father had been recorded as Niketas the Younger, instead of Niketas the Elder. It could have cost you everything. Lineage is more than blood here. It's your currency. You paid 2 servants and a retired monk to correct it. No one ever knew, except you, and the paper. You think about fire sometimes, not metaphorical. Real fire, the kind that eats archives and erases fates. It happened once. Decades ago, the East Wing burned in a lightning storm. Half the legal records went up in smoke. Some women became nobodies overnight. Others forged new names, new histories. That's when the tradition began sleeping with your documents. It wasn't always so literal, but after that night, no one took chances. Now it's ritual. The younger girls copy you. You see them pretending to stretch before bed, fingers ghosting over hidden scrolls sewn into pillows, blankets, undergarments. You don't correct them. Let them learn. Let them believe they're inventing it. Survival here isn't taught. It's absorbed, like ink into old cloth. The evening returns slowly. Soft wind, distant bells. A tray of dates and almonds arrives. You eat absently, eyes still on the document, as if watching it ensures it won't betray you. You've trusted people before. You've regretted it. You've never regretted trusting the clause. You imagine a different life, not one without the emperor, one without the need to prove yourself in writing. But the fantasy never lasts long. You know yourself too well. You were made for this world, as much as you despise it. You were made to sleep not in peace, but in vigilance, not in love, but in law. And as night settles again, folding the palace in velvet silence, you press the parchment against your chest and exhale. This is what intimacy means here. Not touch, not words, but the quiet certainty that when morning comes, your name will still be there, unchanged, unchallenged, undone by nothing but time. The lantern flickers once before it dies, leaving the room bathed in the pale light of moon, filtered through silken drapes. But you're not alarmed. Darkness isn't frightening when you've memorized every corner of your world. You rise slowly, carefully, the scroll still warm from the heat of your body, now pressed against your ribs beneath 3 layers of linen. The servants believe you sleep through the night like a good consort, but your nights are rituals, and your rituals begin when the palace sleeps. You step onto the cool tiles, every footfall a soft whisper, and approach the cedar cabinet carved with peacocks and stars. Inside, beneath sachets of lavender and rose petals, you keep the duplicate, the dry copy with faded ink, just in case the original is ever destroyed or misfiled. It's not as elegant, not as fresh, but it's valid. It lacks the imperial seal, yes, but it bears the notary's hand and the full legal phrasing, which is more than most concubines could dream of. You fold it again 4 times, always 4, and return it to its cloth wrap. Then you sit on the edge of your bed, staring at nothing in particular, remembering how you learned that documents must precede desire. Your first night in the palace wasn't glorious. It was paperwork. The emperor hadn't even seen you yet. You were paraded before his advisors like livestock, assessed for temperament, genealogy, fertility, but the real test, how quickly you could sign your name. They placed a stylus in your hand. recited your official title, Bureau Admitted Consort Candidate, House of Nikitas, and waited. You didn't tremble. You'd practiced on scraps at home, forging your uncle's name for market receipts. Now that skill served you well. The paper you signed that night wasn't even yours. It was a temporary lodging document, but the way the Chamberlain smiled when you dotted the E told you everything you needed to know. In Byzantium, a woman who could sign was a woman who might survive. You remember one of the other girls, Small, from the provinces, who asked whether she needed to sign anything if she was only there to serve tea and please. That same week, she was gone, vanished, no record. It was like she'd never existed. And that terrified you more than any dungeon or punishment ever could. The palace doesn't need to kill you. It can simply erase you. And so, from that day forward, you made it a rule never love a man who kisses you before he signs. Affection is performative. Documentation is proof. People outside the walls, commoners, visitors, even some low-ranking courtiers think the harem is a place of sensual pleasure. They imagine cushions and laughter, secret rendezvous and whispers behind fans. They don't see the archives hidden under the beds, the ink-stained fingers of young girls, the mini courtrooms disguised as salons where women recite memorized clauses instead of poetry. Seduction here is procedural. Before anyone touches your skin, they ask what ink protects it, and if you say none, well, then you're a temporary joy, a passing breeze, a shadow with no consequence. You still remember the night the Emperor first summoned you, not because it was romantic, but because of the document he asked you to bring, your transfer declaration, the eunuch had said, as if he were inviting you to a dinner party and not to the imperial bed. You nearly dropped it, not from nerves, but from surprise that even that your first night needed formal validation. You weren't insulted, you were impressed. He wanted proof. That meant he played by the same rules. That meant you could survive him. The room had smelled of clove and wine, and the Emperor, still young then, had looked at your scroll before your face. You used good ink, he'd said. You replied, "It's not the ink, it's the hand." He'd laughed. And then he'd touched your cheek, but it wasn't the touch you remembered afterward. It was that line about the hand. It had worked. He respected it, and for a while, you thought that might be enough. But time teaches you that respect fades faster than desire. You don't chase the Emperor's gaze anymore. You chase amendments, small updates to your clauses that shift your standing just slightly higher. A word like designated replacing rotational. A clause stating shared privileges with senior consorts tucked into an appendix. These things matter more than jewels. A sapphire can be taken, a seal cannot, or at least, not easily. Tonight, as you sit in silence, you recall the old consort Anna, the one who taught you about ink. She'd been there for years, her hair silvering beneath her gold netting, her joints stiff, but her mind razor sharp. "Make him sign first," she'd whispered once as you bathed beside her. "He'll give you trinkets, poems, even titles, but only what he signs will survive him." You took that to heart. Anna died with 3 documents folded in her dressing gown. One proved she'd borne the Emperor a son who died young. The second declared her right to remain in the palace post-retirement. And the third, a letter of forgiveness in the Emperor's hand for a scandal she never explained. It didn't matter. The letter existed. So she was buried as an honored consort, not a disgraced exile. That's how the game is played. Historians still argue whether these women were mere instruments of dynastic production or clandestine wielders of influence. Some say they held no true power. Others believe they governed the empire from behind embroidered veils. You don't care what they say. You know the truth is written between the margins, where law meets longing, where a single paragraph can preserve a legacy longer than any embrace. Once, you stumbled on an unsigned draft in the laundry, just a scrap, hastily folded, no name, no seal, but the phrasing, "This woman shall retain access to the Southern Archive in the event of dispute." That meant power. That meant she had access to documents others didn't. You slipped it into your robe without thinking. You didn't use it, not yet. But it's hidden now. Safe. Waiting. One day, it might tip the scales. Or it might mean nothing. But the chance it means something, that's enough to risk everything. The younger women don't get it yet. They flirt, They curtsy, they giggle when the emperor passes. You don't blame them. Youth makes fools of us all. But you've seen too many smiles erased, too many rooms repainted, names replaced. The only thing they never change is what's sealed in triplicate and buried in both the archive and your mattress. Even the act of sealing a document has become sensual to you. The soft heat of wax, the press of the ring into the red puddle, the finality of it. You once sealed a blank parchment just to feel the power. It wasn't wise, but it was comforting. It reminded you that even nothing can be made into something with the right stamp. You lie back now, eyes open, scroll in hand. You don't sleep quickly anymore. Too many nights have been shattered by sudden footsteps, by whispering eunuchs, by crises no one explains until morning. You're always alert, always aware. The only peace you feel is when the documents press to your skin. That's the only warmth you trust. Not hands, not words, just ink. The emperor doesn't visit as often now. He's older. He forgets, or he remembers others more easily. You don't care. What matters is this: you're still written, still named, still present on the master list reviewed by the Court of Women every quarter. They call the names in order of precedence. Yours is still ninth. Not high, not low, safe. And as your breathing slows, and your fingers tighten around the parchment just slightly, you wonder what your name will mean when you're gone. A line in a ledger, a footnote in a law, maybe nothing, but tonight, it is everything. By dawn. The courtyard is damp with dew and rumors. Word travels faster than light in this palace, faster than letters, even faster than punishment. You step onto the veranda with a scroll still tucked discreetly under your outer robe, pretending to be interested in the lilies blooming along the low wall. But every fiber of your body is alert. A maid passing with a copper tray says too cheerfully that the Empress is summoning the inner circle before noon. That's never casual. That's when legal wording shifts, when alliances fracture, when a woman you've shared cardamom tea with for 3 years might become your legal rival in a single decree. You nod politely and step back inside, the document suddenly heavy, as though it already knows what's coming. You sit down in front of your mirror, but you don't see yourself. You see the outline of the text in your mind, the phrasing you memorized long ago. Shall retain privileges equivalent to current designation, unless otherwise revised by imperial decree or medical judgment. That last phrase has always unsettled you. Medical judgment. Who defines it? A court physician loyal to your enemies. A diagnosis that might be whispered, not written in this place. One poorly timed fainting spell could strip you of everything. You saw it happen to a woman named Cassian. She collapsed during a procession in the south cloister. By nightfall, her bedding had been removed and her belongings redistributed. Exhaustion, they'd called it, but the real illness was unprotected status. Cassian had trusted her favor, not her parchment, a fatal mistake. So you don't trust your favor, you trust your foresight. You unfold the document again to double-check the signature, not the emperor's, but the notary's. His name is Stylianos, a pale man with elegant hands and lips always pressed tight, like he's constantly tasting something sour. He works quickly, but you once saw him hesitate before signing a divorce clause for one of the dowager concubines. That moment of pause told you everything. Even the scribes play favorites. Even they know which ink dries fastest and which names matter. You keep a mental file of all their tells. Stylianos dots his iotas too high. Gregorios, the junior scribe, always smudges the bottom corner when nervous. Knowledge is your second layer of parchment. You pace your chamber, then stop. Something is wrong. The air is too still. The usual rustle of veils and soft muttering from the hallway is missing. A strange quiet. You pull open the thin curtain separating your chamber from the hall and nearly bump into one of the newer girls. Melania, holding a tray of fig slices. She freezes. Her eyes dart to your hands, then to your robe, then quickly away. It's a tell. She's seen something or heard something. You offer a tight smile. Summoned, you ask. She nods. They're checking documents. She whispers, all of them. You thank her with a nod, close the curtain, and this time, You lock it. Checking documents sounds harmless to outsiders, routine, administrative, but here, it's code. It means someone's trying to shift the hierarchy. Maybe a challenger has risen, maybe a favored woman's scroll was tampered with, maybe a forged decree surfaced. Whatever the cause, it means the parchments you sleep with are now active weapons. It means you need not only to have it, but to understand it better than those who wrote it. You return to your cedar chest and pull out your copy, not the official one, but the annotated version you had made secretly, line by line, with commentary written in the margin by a scholar you bribed through your nursemaid's cousin. The ink is faded, the script tiny. You read every word. You remind yourself that your legal status is not absolute. It's conditional. It hangs on the emperor's current preferences, the political alliances with your family, and whether your phrasing includes terms like non-contingent access or deferential redundancy. You've heard some scholars argue that Byzantine law favored women more than people assume. Others say the only power you had was in being remembered at all. You believe both. The law doesn't love you. It tolerates you if you present it correctly. At noon, the eunuchs begin their rounds. You hear the knock 3 doors down soft, formal, followed by rustling silk and hushed voices. You have minutes. You smooth your robe, open your coffer, and retrieve the official scroll. Its edges are worn now, the imperial seal cracked in one corner, but it's still valid. You know, because you've checked it twice a week since it was issued. You set it on your writing table and stand beside it, posture straight, hands composed. You look like a painting, but inside, you're counting your breaths. When they knock, you answer before the 3rd tap. Stylianos is there, lips pursed, with 2 junior scribes behind him. He doesn't bow. He never does. But he steps inside, glances once at your scroll, and raises a brow. This is the original, he asks. You nod. It's been stored properly. No alterations. He takes it with gloved hands, holds it to the light, and traces the seal with a small tool. There have been complications today, he says, not looking at you. Discrepancies in wording, forged clauses. A few women added unauthorized annotations. I haven't, you reply evenly. Would you like to see the secondary copy? He does. You retrieve it with careful grace. It's clean, if older. When he compares them, he nods once, then again. Yours are consistent. He signs a small slate and hands it to one of the juniors. We may return, he says. Random inspections are being increased. When they leave, your legs nearly give out. You sit hard on the stool, exhale slowly, and place both scrolls back into their wrappings. The inspections are only beginning. That much is clear. Someone is making a move, trying to displace others, and the easiest place to strike is where the law is softest in interpretation. You hear later, just before sunset, that one of the Empress's nieces has challenged 3 women's clauses for redundancy. That's the term used when 2 documents claim the same privilege, and the court has to decide which one came first, or which one holds more weight. Redundancy is a quiet execution. It doesn't spill blood, it spills ink, and those who lose are often reassigned to diplomatic postings far from court, where their titles mean nothing and no one remembers their lineage. You skip supper, your appetite is gone. Instead, you light a lamp, settle onto your cushions, and reread the phrasing again. Privileges to remain without expiration, subject to revision only by mutual decree or in cases of lineage challenge. That last part worries you. You have no child, no confirmed heir. That makes your lineage challengeable by default. Someone could argue that your role no longer serves dynastic value. You make a note to reach out to your cousin, a mid-level scribe in the Ministry of Titles. He might be able to add a footnote, a harmless clarification suggesting your status contributes to ceremonial balance. It's nonsense, but sometimes nonsense keeps you alive. The moon rises again. You press the scroll to your cheek before lying down. You think of the young women who still believe beauty is their shield. You almost pity them, but not quite, because pity softens the instincts, and instincts are how you survive. Not seduction, not charm, not even luck. Only the document, and your ability to wield it like a blade no one sees until it's too late. Tonight the air smells like lavender and betrayal. Someone is crying behind the curtain across the hall, quietly, carefully. the way only palace women know how to cry when they fear that even their grief might be used against them. You don't move. You sit by the oil lamp, your document unfolded once again in your lap, the edge curling slightly from your finger's heat. The phrase you've been repeating all evening blurs before your eyes. Her designation shall remain unless revoked by mutual decree or death. The or death part has always struck you as needlessly poetic for Byzantine legal phrasing. But then again, maybe it isn't poetic at all. Maybe it's just a reminder. That death here is just another kind of edit. Today's inspection wasn't random. You know that now. It was too precise, too coordinated. Stylianos came in looking for something or someone, and you suspect he already knew who. That's what makes it dangerous when they pretend to be surprised by the thing they themselves orchestrated. You think about the women they targeted, young, mostly, knew enough not to understand the ritual of protection. They whispered among themselves about perfume and poems. Never parchment. Now their rooms are silent. One girl hasn't spoken since her document was deemed insufficiently sealed. She doesn't even look up when you pass her. You want to warn the others, but what would you say, sleep with your signature? Trust the clause, not the kiss. They wouldn't listen. You didn't, at first. You were 17 when they brought you here, barely able to sit without trembling, convinced you'd be loved into permanence. That first week, you learned otherwise. It wasn't cruelty, it was indifference. A system so enormous and paper-bound that your feelings were irrelevant unless footnoted by a priest or printed on legal scrolls. The women who lasted the real survivors learned to weaponize their paperwork like silk daggers. Spy scrolls. You heard someone call them. They weren't just records. They were shields, traps, bargains, promises, secrets, and yes, spies. You still remember your first glimpse of one, a small, folded document, passed between two consorts over a bowl of pomegranates. It looked like a dinner invitation, but you later learned it was a mutual defense clause if either woman were accused of overstepping rank. The other would confirm her innocence. It was clever. It was also doomed. One of them betrayed the other within 3 weeks. That's the other rule no one writes down. Every scroll has an expiration date, even the ones that don't say so. So you start copying your own, not officially. Of course, that's forbidden. But you write fragments, phrases, footnotes, key terms, and you hide them. Under floor tiles, inside the sleeves of dresses you no longer wear, in a soap dish lined with wax. You never trust a single location. If you're ever accused, you want redundancy. You want your truth to exist in multiple locations, like a prayer whispered by 100 voices, because one voice yours won't be enough when they come. They'll say your seal was faded, your phrasing ambiguous, that someone else had a newer claim, and they'll use Stylianos' words against you. It's only procedure. That phrase has ended lives. Tonight, you write again. Your pen gliding across a scrap of reused parchment in lemon water ink, just faint enough to avoid suspicion, just strong enough to be legible under firelight. The bearer of this clause retains ceremonial access to the archives under all circumstances except war. It's a lie. No such clause exists in your official scroll. But if war breaks out and records go missing, it could become true by absence. You fold it carefully, wrap it in a ribbon, and press it into the seam of your mattress next to the sachet of cloves. Outside, the palace groans like an old ship. The wind shifts. You hear voices, muffled but sharp male voices, not eunuchs, not guards, visitors. That's rare this late. You douse the lamp and go still. Your pulse kicks up, not from fear, but readiness. Sometimes, the most valuable scrolls aren't the ones that protect you, but the ones that incriminate others. There's power in knowing who forged what, who changed which line, who deleted whose name. You have a few of those, too. Not the scrolls themselves, but transcripts, mentions, observations, all tucked into your journal, written in cipher you invented as a child. Half Greek, half dream. You once showed it to Anna, the old consort with a laugh like bells. She skimmed a page and said, "If they kill you, I'll frame this and hang it over my bed." Then she died. Peacefully, they said. But you've seen what peace looks like here. It's usually wrapped in cloth and buried before questions can be asked. You don't want peace, you want control, and paper is the only kind that doesn't stab you in your sleep. They say the emperor once sent a consort away because her scrolls conflicted with the rhythm of the court. That's what the record says. But everyone knows what it meant. Her clauses contradicted someone else's, someone higher, someone who edited the archive before she could appeal, and so she vanished. Her name scraped off records, her lineage reassigned, her possessions redistributed as if she were never born. You keep your fingers on the edge of your scroll now, as if your touch could anchor it in history. There's a fringe theory whispered by the scribes that some of the most powerful clauses in the harem were never officially sanctioned. They were whisper contracts, passed verbally, memorized, reinforced by mutual fear. The scrolls were copied in secret, never signed but recognized by everyone who mattered. You've never seen one, but you've heard a phrase often repeated in the bathhouse. If it's known in the veil room, it's known in law. No one can agree where that came from, or what it means. But it chills you every time, because it suggests that what's written isn't always what's real, and that reality is just another version waiting to be copied by the right hand. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine harem was truly a seat of female power, or merely a stage for controlled obedience. Some paint it as a golden cage, others as a velvet throne. But you know better. You know it's a library of living women, each of you bound, folded, shelved, and occasionally burned. Your pages are your protection, but also your prison. You can't act without them, can't speak freely unless you've cross-referenced yourself into invincibility. Even your silences are drafted in triplicate. You glance again at your legal scroll, folded with such care, retains title unless annulled by dual consent. What if he never consents? What if he simply forgets you exist? Does that make you permanent or invisible? It's a cruel paradox. And yet, you cling to the parchment, because at least it's legible. At least it sees you. Your breathing slows. The footsteps outside have faded. Somewhere, a night bird calls. You close your eyes, one hand still on the scroll, and drift into sleep, but not before whispering the first line aloud. The way a warrior mutters a prayer before battle. The bearer of this clause shall be recognized. Your voice fades, but the ink remembers. You wake before the light finds you, already half sitting, heart drumming against your ribs like it's trying to outpace memory. Your hand is beneath your robe before your mind is even fully awake. Fingers pressing against the soft parchment tucked along your side, like a second skin. It's still there, not missing, not moved, not damp. You exhale and lean back onto the pillows. You've never slept deeply, not since arriving here. The dreams are rarely dreams, more like flickers of past legal hearings and words recited before scribes. Your name pronounced in unfamiliar tones. Men deciding who you are in rooms where your voice isn't invited. So now, when you sleep, your body remains alert, like a door propped open. Some women trust the walls to protect them. You don't. The walls here echo your footsteps back to you as if to say, "We remember everything, but we won't help you." Eunuchs come early, always before breakfast, before gossip wakes fully and the kitchens begin to buzz. They shuffle silently, as if ceremony demands reverence even in suspicion. This morning it's not Stylianos, but an older man with eyebrows like wings and a jaw that doesn't move when he speaks. He brings nothing but a nod, a brief glance at the scroll you offer without being asked, and then he's gone. You try not to read into it. Sometimes a quick check is just a quick check. Other times, it means your name has joined the conversation and not in a flattering way. You reach for the polished silver mirror, not to admire, just to confirm. No smudge on your face, no stain on your robe, no disheveled trace of panic. The game here is subtle. You lose it the moment you look like you're playing. You step into your slippers and begin your day as if everything is ordinary, because for now, it still is. But by mid-morning, there's a shift. You feel it not in what is said, but in what isn't. No greetings from the senior consort as she passes you in the corridor. No returned smile from the girl you helped 3 weeks ago. The silence feels pointed. You're not being ignored. You're being observed. Watched like a scroll on a table waiting for a mistake. So you pause outside the tapestry hall and adjust your sash. Your movements slow and deliberate. If they're watching, let them see composure. Let them see someone who knows her position is protected not by favor, but by parchment. At lunch, there's no word from the emperor. Not unusual, but inconvenient. The longer he's absent, the more volatile the rankings become. The legal documents hold for now, but they're not immune to ambiguity. A prolonged silence from the throne invites reinterpretation. That's what happened with Lady Arete 3 years ago. Her designation said active consort with standing, but after 6 months without an audience, it was argued that standing no longer applied. She fought it, lost. The term was legally ambiguous, and ambiguity is the most dangerous shape in the imperial court. It's what predators slip through, what scribes exploit. So after the meal, you return to your chamber, pull out your annotated copy, and search for vulnerable phrasing. There, unless revoked by joint decree. You've always assumed joint meant the emperor and the empress council, but it could be interpreted as the emperor and any authorized representative. If someone positioned herself cleverly like, say, the ambitious niece of the emperor's cousin, she could argue her way into that joint and rescind you like a clause in a merchant's contract. You underline the word, make a mental note. You'll need to speak with Thecla. She's one of the elder matrons. And more importantly, her brother is in the Bureau of Interpretive Edicts. If she whispers your concern in the right ear, a clarification could be issued quietly, without scandal. Just a footnote. But footnotes change fates. Later that afternoon, as you pass under the lemon trees by the colonnade, you hear your name, not spoken, exactly murmured. Bent around the edge of another woman's sentence, you turn your head. The speaker notices and blushes. She tries to cover it with a comment about your shoes. You smile politely and keep walking. But it's done. You've entered the zone of suspicion. This is how it begins. Not with a public accusation, with whispers, with micro questions, with someone asking the scribes what year your scroll was dated. You return to your room and lay the document out on the table. You smooth the corners. You say nothing. You just look at it, as if it might speak first. You wonder how many women have stared at the same ink, and wondered if it still protected them. There's comfort in the ritual, even when you're uncertain. The act of unfolding it, checking the seal, tracing the lines of your name, gives you the illusion of control. Illusions are everything here. They keep you breathing. Then something peculiar happens. You receive a visitor, not a eunuch, not a maid, a scribe, young, nervous. He bows too deeply and hands you a message, a formal request for clarification. Your heart doesn't race. It hardens, because you know what this means. Someone has filed a question about your clause. It's procedural, yes, but deadly. They're not accusing you. They're asking whether your scroll is still accurate, which is worse, because now it's not personal, it's administrative. And administration is the sharpest blade in the palace. The request is phrased politely, with due respect. But the intention is clear. Someone wants your status reevaluated, not revoked, not yet, but opened. And once a clause is open for review, anyone with a motive can add commentary. It becomes a public document, no longer a private shield. You nod, thank the boy, and dismiss him. You keep smiling until the door clicks shut. Then you press your palms to the cool stone wall and breathe through your teeth. You have 2 days to respond. Enough time to assemble witnesses, produce complementary documents, perhaps even draw on your ally in the ceremonial office for a supportive scroll confirming your presence at recent imperial audiences. You'll need to be careful. Too much urgency signals guilt. Too little invites intervention. You sit down and begin drafting your response. Every word is a dagger dressed as lace. You don't argue your status, you affirm it. You cite precedents. You quote from past decrees. You end with a phrase you remember Anna using in her final defense. Let the ink not be judged by the silence of its scribe, but by the presence of its seal. You copy it verbatim. She'd be proud. As night returns, you fold the letter and slip it beside your original scroll. You don't sleep yet. You sit by the window, watching the moon carve lines into the courtyard, and wonder who challenged you. The Empress's niece, the new favorite, a woman you haven't even noticed. That's the danger of this place. Your rival might wear your perfume, braid your hair, laugh at your jokes, all while planning to remove you like a comma in a clause. You think of all the women who came before you, not the famous ones, the forgotten ones, the ones who loved but didn't legalize, who whispered secrets into the emperor's ear but never saw their names etched beside his, who were called beloved but never cited, who weren't erased, they were simply never recorded. And you know this, you will not be one of them. You are written, you are signed, you are sealed. And if someone wants to remove you, they'll need more than gossip and jealousy. They'll need cleaner ink, stronger allies, and a better understanding of Byzantine law than you. Good luck to them. You sleep with your hand resting flat against the scroll, not clutching it, no, that would suggest desperation, but simply there, like two old conspirators sharing body heat. By now, the feel of parchment on your palm is more familiar than the touch of skin. You know its texture better than your own heartbeat. And tonight, after the inquiry was delivered and your carefully worded response composed, the silence feels even more dangerous than noise. When there's no sound in the hallways, when even the eunuchs walk as if on clouds, it means something is moving beneath the surface. Someone is speaking in rooms you're not allowed to enter, and the only defense you have is lying beside you under silk sheets and incense smoke quietly crinkling with every breath. You think about the emperor not with longing, but with calculation. He hasn't summoned you in 10 nights. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. His patterns are irregular, driven by mood, illness, or diplomacy. But 10 nights is long enough to make your status vulnerable. The law accounts for absence, but only within certain limits. You reach for your copy again, scanning the clause that reads, "To be maintained in proximity and ritual relevance unless superseded by declared reassignment." It's a good line, flexible. It says nothing definitive, but implies significance. It was Anna who gave you that phrasing, years ago, as if passing on a spell, and it has held ever since. But laws bend in cold winds, and tonight, the wind slips through the shutters in long, thin sighs, as if the palace itself is reconsidering your place. By morning, a new decree is read aloud in the garden by one of the imperial heralds, a man whose voice seems made for betrayal, smooth, confident, and too loud. You stand with the others, perfectly still, while he announces the official confirmation of 3 women's status upgrades. One of them is Theodora, the emerald-robed favorite with a giggle too bright to last. She's now titled Ritually Honored, which means nothing and everything, depending on how the judges interpret it. It doesn't replace you, not technically, but it overlaps. And in this game, overlap is more dangerous than exclusion. If you're excluded, you can petition. But if someone claims the same rights you do under a newer scroll, then you're in contradiction. And the law always corrects contradiction by erasing the older version. So you do what you always do, you retreat to your chamber, take out your scroll, and reread it until it breathes with you. You check the date of issue. It predates Theodora's by 14 months. That helps. You've never amended it. That helps. 2, it suggests clarity, permanence. But what if someone argues that your language is outdated, that your clause lacks modern ceremonial terms now preferred in the court? You scribble 3 possible revisions on wax tablets, just in case you need to petition for a new copy. But you hesitate. A new scroll always risks reinterpretation. A new seal means new eyes. New eyes mean new scrutiny. Maybe it's better to stay quiet. Or maybe quiet is a trap. This is the labyrinth, and there's no thread. That night, your food tray comes late. A subtle warning. Delayed meals in the harem are not punishments. Not officially, but you know better. Food tells the truth here. A tray that's cold means you've been bumped in priority. One without fruit. You're being sidelined. A missed tray. Well, that's the prelude to exile. Yours is still warm, but the figs are missing. You eat the olives slowly, thinking. They've started to test you. Not with knives. Not with poison yet, but with silence. Omission. Questions. The next step will be a subtle discrediting. Someone will suggest that your clause is vague. Someone else will agree. And once 2 voices echo the same doubt, the third becomes policy. So you prepare. You retrieve your hidden transcripts, your margins, your annotations. You revisit the memory of every phrase ever spoken about you in public gatherings. You organize them in your mind like a scribe sorting scrolls. The emperor once said she steadies the room. That's useful. She listens more than she speaks. Dangerous, that can be twisted into suspicion. Her scroll is older than mine. One girl whispered once. That's both defense and curse. You know the process? You've seen it play out before. They call it revision, but it's closer to ritual assassination. The woman being revised is invited to speak. They present her scroll on a table under too much sunlight. They ask if she has any additions. That's the moment of death, because additions imply doubt. Denial implies fear, and silence. Silence is treated as arrogance. There's no correct response, only the one they choose not to punish. You light a stick of myrrh and write again. This time, a third version of your scroll. Not an official copy, not even for your allies. This one is for you, a kind of will, if necessary. It outlines your claims, your loyalties, your titles. You write your lineage across the top in letters larger than usual. You name your cousins in the Bureau of Rights, your distant aunt in the nunnery near Chrysopolis, your connection to the minor provincial governor through your father's trade marriage. It's a web. You anchor yourself in it, like a spider surrounded by hungry birds. You seal this scroll not with wax, but with hair your own, plucked strand by strand and braided tightly around the parchment. It's old-fashioned, superstitious, but you trust the old ways. They haven't failed you yet. By the third day, Theodore's elevation has started to ripple. New robes, new rooms, a second eunuch assigned to her. It's happening, slowly, like frost across glass. You nod when you pass her in the baths. She returns it with a smile too bright, too fast. She's scared. That's the secret. Everyone here is scared, even the ones rising, especially them, because the higher you go, the more your scroll becomes a target. And you know Theodora doesn't sleep with hers. Not yet. You visit Thecla. She listens, nods. She agrees to mention your scroll in passing during her next visit to the edict's chamber. Just a reminder, she says, that your wording remains favored by tradition. That's all she'll say, but that's enough. A whisper in the right archive carries more weight than a shout in the gardens. And just before sunset, the emperor appears. Not to you, of course, but close. He walks through the eastern cloister, hands clasped behind his back, listening to an advisor drone on about harvest figures. He doesn't glance at you as he passes, but you bow anyway. The angle of your bow is perfect, neither submissive nor bold. You rise and meet his gaze just for a breath. Nothing in his eyes. No recognition, but no rejection either. Neutrality is oxygen. You inhale. Back in your chamber, the lamp flickers as you press the scroll to your heart. You lie back and stare at the ceiling, trying to remember if the clause you rewrote earlier was better than the original. You'll compare them again tomorrow. For now, you just need to survive the night. The wind picks up again. You close your eyes and listen to the rustle of paper beneath your breath. By the time the sun crests the domes of the upper palace and casts narrow golden ribbons onto the corridor tiles, you've already read your scroll 3 times. Not for reassurance, not anymore. Now it's analysis. Now it's precision. You're dissecting it the way an archivist would pick apart a forged relic, line by line, tone by tone, tracing the brushstrokes of the scribe's pen, as if his fatigue or loyalty might have left a clue in the curvature of a letter. You catch yourself mouthing the words again by acknowledgement of established favor and ceremonial utility. The bearer shall retain placement among the inner court. Ceremonial utility. You pause. That phrase, it's deliberately vague, which once served as protection broad enough to apply in any season, but now, you see how easily it could be turned against you. If someone were to claim your utility had diminished, if, for instance, you hadn't appeared in a public ritual in too long, it might be interpreted as an absence of function. And if you're no longer useful in ceremony, then what exactly are you? You rise, dress simply, and make your way to the courtyard with the marble fountain. The others are already there, pretending not to calculate each other's glances, robes, and proximity to the Empress's senior chamberlain. Everything here is a visual document. Even your silence is recorded. You spot Theodora again, seated beneath the shade of a pomegranate tree, speaking softly to one of the imperial tutors. She's begun taking lessons in state geography, a smart move, a sign of dynastic seriousness. You know what it is, she's posturing for Empress in waiting. You don't envy her. The ones who climb fastest often fall before winter, but still, her movements cast shadows. You feel them. Someone behind you whispers your name, not loudly, not maliciously, but softly enough that it lands like an accident. You don't turn around. You don't need to. The whisper itself is enough. That's how they signal now. Not through accusations, but through echoing presence. You are being positioned as a clause to be reconsidered. Not erased, not yet, but reviewed. And in this palace, a review is a prelude. You smile faintly, as if you hadn't heard. You step to the fountain, dip your fingers into the cold water, and let the silence stretch until it breaks itself. Later that day, you send a message to the scriptorium. Not through the usual eunuchs, they're too visible, but through a linen maid whose brother tends the inkstones. The note is brief. Request clarification on phrase ceremonial utility. See Record 9.7 for precedent. You know Record 9.7. It was Anna's. She used it to argue that presence in imperial processions, even without direct interaction, constituted ceremonial relevance. Her appeal had been successful temporarily, but the precedent was entered into the archive, and archives, unlike emperors, have long memories. While you wait for a response, you clean. Not for dust, but for distraction. You reorganize your scroll copies, checking the stitching of the seams where duplicates are hidden. You press a light iron to the corners of the main parchment, just enough to smooth the edges. Presentation matters. Stylianos once rejected a perfectly valid scroll because the woman had left a wine stain on the margin. He cited disrespect for the sanctity of text. You've never forgotten it. Every fold you make is a prayer for continuity. By nightfall, the maid returns. A scrap of paper hidden in a pouch of dried lavender. You unfold it slowly, careful not to tear it. Ceremonial utility deemed valid if name appears on official roster of 3 sequential functions. Regardless of spoken role, you exhale. That's good. You've attended all 3 most recent observances, even if you weren't addressed directly. You retrieve the event programs from your chest, carefully preserved copies, and check for your name. There it is. Line 12, line 8, line 15. That's 3. That's coverage. That's defense. You seal them in an envelope with a ribbon of your house, color deep violet, and mark it for internal reference. If you're summoned, you'll present it. If you're not, it will remain in waiting, like a soldier at rest. You think about Anna again, about the night she told you, it's not the emperor's gaze you need to fear, it's the scribe's hands. They kill more women than the sword. You thought she was being dramatic. Then Stylianos redacted a woman's title on her deathbed. She had no children, no allies. Her tomb reads, "Beloved of the court," a phrase that means everything and nothing. You remember her name, but only because you found it scribbled on the back of a draft contract once, misfiled and stained with ash. Even her memory was temporary. The next morning brings a summons from the Chamberlain of Internal Order, not the Emperor, not the Empress's court. The Chamberlain's role is specific. He deals in revisions, audits, and, when necessary, removals. You feel your stomach drop, but keep your expression still. You thank the messenger, nod once, and turn away without hurry. No one must see you react. Not yet. In your chamber, you rehearse. Not your story. Your citations. You line up phrases like armor, imperial presence confirmed at Equinox Parade, no conflicting designations submitted since last audit, no active petitions against standing. You practice until your voice sounds like someone else is a woman who cannot be questioned because she already has the answer memorized in 3 dialects. Then, before leaving, you do the most important thing, you kiss the scroll. Not out of sentiment, out of solidarity. It's the only thing in this entire empire that knows exactly who you are. The Chamberlain receives you in the small west court. Beneath a painted ceiling of birds no one can identify anymore. He gestures for you to sit, but doesn't look at you. "This will be quick," he says. They always say that. He places your scroll on the table, unrolls it, points. There's concern regarding the continued relevance of this clause, he says. He doesn't accuse, he suggests. It's more polite, more lethal. You wait one breath, then place the event programs before him, then your sealed references, then, finally, your duplicate copy with annotations. He reads in silence. You count the birds on the ceiling. 7 cranes, 4 swans, 1 peacock. All the wrong kinds for Byzantium. You wonder who painted them. You wonder if she lasted. Finally, the Chamberlain sighs. Not displeased, just tired. This is adequate, he says. But you should consider updating the language. Certain phrasing has evolved. You nod. I will request a formal review. You say, good. He returns the documents. Doesn't smile, doesn't bow. You leave. You've survived. But only just. That night, you burn the lemon water ink copy. Just in case. It curls into ash in your brazier, the letters disappearing in reverse. You whisper each phrase as it vanishes, like a litany, like a vow, like a girl holding her breath at the bottom of a well, waiting for the sound of rescue. There's something unsettling about surviving a challenge in the Byzantine court, not because it brings relief, but because it brings attention. And in this palace, attention is a kind of infection. Now that you've withstood the Chamberlain's inquiry, your name will pass from scroll to scroll, mouth to mouth, no longer in whispers, but in a tone thick with implication, notorious for endurance, known for document discipline, a woman who sleeps with her claws like a lover. They say these things as if they're insults, but you know they're afraid, because once a woman defends her scroll in open process and wins, she becomes harder to undo. Not impossible, nothing here is ever immune, but the ink stains deeper into the parchment. And so tonight, while other women gossip about the next festival, you sit alone on your cushions, cross-legged, your scroll resting flat against your lap like a coiled serpent, eyes closed, feeling the weight of having survived. You don't move, you don't eat, you just listen to the distant chime of bells, to the faint ripple of voices through layers of velvet drapery, and to the soft, sweet rustling of paper beneath your breath. A eunuch passes outside your door, humming. That, too, means something. The court is settling for now, but you've seen it before. Calm as in safety. Calm as the sound of a new plot being drafted. You think of your bridesmaid, once your closest companion. She still lives in the palace, technically, but her role has changed. She holds documents now on your behalf, but also on behalf of others. A backup, a safeguard, or so you once believed. But lately, you've begun to wonder, when was the last time she showed you the duplicate scroll? When was the last time she said your name without tilting her head slightly, calculating its weight? You hate that you have to think this way, but distrust is part of your diet now, like bread, like olives, like the scent of ink on your fingertips every morning. That night, you call her in. She arrives barefoot, which annoys you more than it should. The informality, the softness. She hugs you, but her arm lingers on your shoulder a moment too long. I heard, she says, you were brave. Brave. Not correct. Not justified. Just brave. The word lands like a grain of sand in your throat. You pour her rose water, gesture toward the writing table. Do you still have my mirror claws, you ask? Gently, she stiffens. Just a breath. Of course, she replies, too quickly. I keep it under the tapestry frame. You nod, you smile, but now you know. You won't accuse her, not yet. You have no proof, and here, proof is everything. Emotion is ornamental, logic is tolerated, but proof, that's gospel. You'll find it, you'll create it, if you have to. You're not the girl who arrived with trembling hands and calloused feet anymore. You're something else now, something with sharper edges and thinner patience. After she leaves, you sit at the table and write a new scroll, not a legal one. Not yet, but a draft. A fresh version of your clause, updated with stronger terms, clearer dates, more explicit responsibilities. You add a line about your function in the court's ceremonial calendar. You quote an old precedent, one that no longer circulates publicly, You know the law better than some of the clerks now. You've studied it like others study music. You don't want power for its own sake. You want safety. And in this world, those are the same thing. The next day, you request an audience with the senior court scribe. It's a bold move, not reckless, but visible. You want them to see that you're not hiding, that you are not merely defending your clause, you are refining it, evolving it. Stylianos, of course, is there. He always is. His eyes drift over your robe, then your scroll, then the draft in your hand. He gestures for you to sit, opens the draft, and reads. His fingers are stained with ink. You wonder if they ever come clean. This is aggressive, he says at last. It's clear, you reply. Clarity can be dangerous, he murmurs, but he signs it anyway. Not approval, just acknowledgement. A step, a flicker, a wedge driven deeper into the door. You leave with your heart pounding, your throat dry, your steps measured. One misstep here, and the scroll becomes a rope, but one clean move, and you rise. Later that week, during the evening incense ritual, the Empress walks through the halls flanked by her attendants. You're not in her inner circle, but she pauses when she sees you. Just briefly. You're the one with the strong pen, she says, her voice more amused than warm. You bow, say nothing. She moves on, but the sentence lingers. A strong pen. That can mean survival, or threat, or both. You begin to see changes. Your food tray includes fruit again. Your name is spoken without sarcasm in morning reports. When the Emperor passes, his eyes rest on you longer than they used to. Not affection, but recognition. That, too, is power. Then one morning, as you open your cedar chest to rotate the parchment layers, you find a mark faint, but deliberate. A smudge in the corner that wasn't there before. It's small. Could be dust. Could be a slip of ink. But, someone has handled your scroll. Someone without gloves. You feel rage rise in your throat. Bitter and hot. Not fear fury. Because now it's war. Not public. Not loud. But a battle of clauses, seals, phrases whispered into the ears of scribes and judges who never look you in the eye. You burn the outer case, quietly. Replace it with a fresh linen wrap. You insert a sliver of hair into the folds a tell, so you'll know next time. And you write another copy, in different ink, in smaller script. You hide it beneath the floor tile by the window, where the moonlight falls every night at the same angle. You don't sleep that night, not out of fear, out of calculation. Sleep is for those who think the ink on their scroll is permanent. It never is. You think of Theodora again. She's risen too fast. Her scroll is lavish, gold-leafed, triple-sealed, carried by her own eunuch in a velvet case. But it's fragile, ornamental, overwritten, designed to impress, not protect. It won't last. Not if the Emperor tires of her voice, not if the scribes grow bored, not if the Empress feels the balance shift. You wonder if she sleeps with hers. You doubt it. You do, and tonight, as you lie back, scroll pressed once more beneath your ribs, you whisper something you've never said aloud before. Not a prayer, not a wish, just a fact. I will not be erased, and you believe it. Morning arrives with a metallic scent of ink and damp parchment only. It's not coming from your scroll. It's the hall outside. The corridor has been scrubbed too harshly, the stone's still wet, and that smell, the tang of bureaucracy, is stronger than incense. You don't need to ask what happened. Something was altered overnight. Somewhere. A scroll changed hands. Someone's status was rewritten while she slept, or while she thought she was protected. You sit up slowly, every movement intentional. This is the kind of morning where even breathing feels like litigation. The scroll under your pillow is warm. It stayed close to you all night, but warmth doesn't mean safety. It never has. You unfold it on your lap, flatten it with steady fingers, and scan the opening line. Still yours, still unaltered, still legal, but the edges feel looser, like the fabric of the palace itself has shifted beneath you, and your claws is balancing on newer cracks. Down in the baths, women are already whispering. You arrive late, deliberate, wrapped in a robe of unadorned white, clean, simple, authoritative. You don't wear jewels on days like this. Too much sparkle draws scrutiny. One of the newer women, a girl named Ligeia with eyes too open for her own good, asks you in a hushed voice if you heard about the Empress's cousin. You blink. No, you hadn't. She lost her scroll. Ligeia says, gone. They say she left it in the archive too long without renewing it. Now someone else has claimed her designation. You nod slowly, lips pursed, and reply, she didn't lose her scroll. She lost her memory. That's the truth, isn't it, in Byzantium? Forgetting is fatal. You don't misplace protection. You misplace your right to exist. Ligeia looks frightened. You don't comfort her. You finish bathing and return to your chamber where, as always, the air feels cooler than it should. You're thinking of the archive now. The actual room, the real one, deep inside the administrative quarter, not the decorative records chamber where ceremonial copies are stored for visitors to admire. No, the real archive, where the original scrolls live, guarded by eunuchs who speak in whispers and walk barefoot on marble that has been touched by centuries of women's names. You've only been there twice. The first time, you were newly admitted, summoned for a confirmation stamp. The second time, you escorted Anna, who was too frail to walk alone. That day, you watched her press her thumbprint to a clause so old the ink had faded into rust, and you saw the scribe nod with a kind of reverence you've never forgotten. You want to go again, not because you need to, because you should. A visit to the archive is a declaration of intent. It says you are alive, present, and literate. It says you still know how to read your own name in a room where thousands have been quietly unwritten. So you request permission. It takes 3 hours for the response. During that time, you write nothing, eat nothing, speak to no one. You sit at your writing desk, scroll unfolded before you, and reread every single word of your clause, measuring the language for the weakness. In recognition of her ceremonial function, you pause. That again, the term that saved you once. Could it trap you now? Ceremonial function implies ongoing contribution. But if no ceremony has occurred recently, no. You stop yourself. You attended the harvest invocation just last week. You wore blue, stood 3 rows from the altar. Stiliano saw you. You make a note to have a witness affidavit prepared. The note arrives before sunset. You are cleared to visit the archive at the 3rd bell tomorrow. You thank the messenger, tip him with a slice of quince, and begin preparing. You'll need your primary scroll, your house lineage clause, the sealed envelope of a van attendance, and the revised draft with clarifying language just in case. You pack them all into a silk pouch, stitched into the lining of your robe. You also carry a sliver of dried inkstone tucked into your sleeve, a charm gifted by a retired scribe. For steadiness of hand, he said. You didn't believe him, but you kept it anyway. That night, you sleep lightly. The scroll stays under your pillow, as always, but now its presence feels more like armor than comfort. You wrap your fingers around it in the dark and repeat, silently, the most important lines. This clause affirms her name. This clause affirms her space. This clause affirms her right to remain. These aren't just legal terms. They're breath. They're being. The morning arrives gray and brittle. Clouds crowd the sky like unsent letters. You dress in navy formal, muted, serious, and braid your hair close to your scalp. No ornaments. You want to look unbreakable. You walk the stone path slowly, passing fountains, marble benches, and the gold-latticed windows of chambers where women with no scrolls press their foreheads against the glass, hoping proximity is enough to earn them memory. The archive doors are taller than they need to be, intimidating by design, carved with birds of prey owls, hawks, an eagle with a parchment clutched in its talons. You show your summons to the gate eunuch. He checks the seal, then opens the doors with a motion so smooth it feels like falling. Inside, the air's dry, cold, silent. Scrolls line the walls in neat compartments, arranged not by name but by status ceremonial, bloodline, consort, hereditary, contested. You know where yours should be. You walk there, guided by instinct and memory, until you find the shelf. And yes, there it is. Your original, aged, but intact. Your name still clear, the seal slightly worn, but unbroken. You request to hold it. The scribe watches you carefully as he lifts it out with both hands. You receive it like one would receive a child. Then you sit, you breathe, and you begin comparing your copy to the original. Every line, every comma, every date. You're not paranoid. You're exact. There's a difference. And then you see it. Not an error. A difference. The original reads to remain within ceremonial duties of the inner sanctum. Your copy reads to remain within ceremonial duties of the inner court. One word, sanctum, court, similar. Almost synonymous, but not quite. Sanctum implies the chapel, the ceremonial heart. Court implies the broader administrative body. You don't remember changing it. Maybe the copyist made the edit without consulting you. Or maybe you made the adjustment long ago, assuming it was harmless. It might be harmless, but it might not. If someone were to notice, if someone with a motive were to claim inconsistency, this could be used to question authenticity. You place both scrolls side by side. You call over the scribe. He examines the discrepancy, doesn't speak, just nods, then says the word that matters more than any accusation. Noted. Noted means entered. Entered means known. Known means exposed. You take your scrolls back, thank the archive, and leave. By the time you reach your chamber, the sky has opened. Rain lashes the stone like ink on vellum. You close the shutters, sit, breathe. One word, that's all it takes here. And so, as thunder shakes the glass, you reach for your drafting tools, you light the lamp, you unroll your scroll, and you begin again. Not to correct, to preempt, because in Byzantium, she who writes fastest survives longest. You spend the rest of the day writing as if your fingers are being chased, ink bleeding across parchment in steady, practiced lines. The rhythm of your thoughts almost synced with the rain slapping against the glass. You barely pause to breathe. The discrepancy is small, yes, but in the Byzantine court, small things open great chasms. Sanctum versus court, it could be dismissed as a scribal error or weaponized as a false claim of privilege. It depends on who notices it, and, more importantly, who wants it noticed. You know this palace too well to assume anyone will let it pass unexamined. So, you act preemptively. You draft a correction, no, not a correction. A clarification. That's the term the scribes prefer. Clarification sounds gentle, administrative, harmless, like you're doing them a favor by helping their records align. It doesn't imply guilt. It implies precision. And here, precision is its own kind of seduction. You consider how to phrase it. You don't want to look like you've discovered an error. That suggests negligence. Instead, you draft the addendum as a reaffirmation of language consistency, noting how ceremonial spaces court, sanctum, and inner processional wing are often used interchangeably in palace vernacular. It's a subtle argument, steeped in plausible deniability. You cite a precedent from a century ago, involving a consort named Helene whose scrolls used two different terms for her status, yet were upheld by the court on the grounds that intent was sustained through equivalence. You know it's obscure. That's why it works. The more arcane the citation, the fewer rivals can challenge it. You sign it with a hand that doesn't tremble. Then you prepare the scroll for delivery sealed with violet wax, pressed with your family's signet, not your house crest. No, your grandmother's personal seal. A small detail, but one that invokes lineage and stability. Your grandmother died during a solar eclipse. People called her the Empress of Shadows because she advised 5 different court women and buried 3 of them. You learn to write with her quills. The rain continues, a steady curtain of sound. You wait by the window until the courier arrives, one of the eunuchs from the ink passage, the quiet ones. You pass him the scroll without a word. He bows. And just like that, your words are moving through the veins of the palace, entering rooms where you cannot go, sitting on desks beside steaming tea, waiting to be read by hands that decide your future without knowing your face. And now, the waiting begins. You've always hated waiting. It's the most dangerous time, not because nothing is happening, but because everything might be happening at once, just out of sight. While your scroll travels, someone else could be drafting a counterclaim. Someone could be offering a favor to a scribe. Someone could be suggesting that you're too quick with your clauses. too eager to anticipate legal doubt. There's a fine line between preparedness and perceived guilt, and you don't always know when you've crossed it. To distract yourself, you visit the tapestry gallery, not the public one, the private wing, where the old dynasties are stitched into fabric, their wives and daughters immortalized in wool and silk. You walk slowly, reading the names beneath the faces. Some are still known, most are forgotten. The tapestries that hang higher tend to belong to the women whose scrolls were preserved. The lower ones, well, some have no name at all, just consort of record. You stop before one in particular, a woman with a tired gaze and ink-stained fingers. You've studied her story before. She'd been a translator, fluent in 4 tongues. She fell from favor after someone altered a phrase in her contract, changed permanent assignment to provisional. Just one word. She was gone within the week. Back in your chamber, the rain finally slows. Dusk presses against the glass like soft hands. You sit on your sleeping mat, scroll under your palm, breathing in silence. Then 3 knocks, measured, official. You open the door to find Stylianos. He doesn't bow. He never does. But he holds something in his hands, a scroll. Not yours. A response. He enters without asking. The clarification has been received, he says. It's thorough. And timely. You nod. You want to ask what that means, but you don't. You let the silence stretch. Finally, he places the scroll on your desk. A copy of your updated clause has been added to the ceremonial register, pending formal acknowledgement at the next assembly. You exhale quietly. That means it's valid. That means it's protected. But then he adds, there was a note attached, not from the court, from another woman. Your heart flickers. A note. He nods, unsigned, but clearly familiar with your record. It cited the original discrepancy, made a case for deliberate misrepresentation. Of course someone saw it. Maybe Theodora. Maybe someone you haven't even suspected. The palace doesn't require enemies to destroy you. It only requires silence while someone else sharpens the knife. What happens now, you ask? Stylianos shrugs. Nothing. For now. Your clarification covers it, but if your name comes up again, he lets the sentence hang. You understand? He leaves. You sit back down. You stare at the wall for a long time. Then you do something strange. You laugh. It's not joy. It's not madness. It's clarity. You realize now this will never end. There will never be a version of your scroll that isn't questioned. Never a phrasing so perfect that it cannot be bent. Even the best drafted clause is just a delay, a postponement of erasure. What survives is not the document, but the woman who knows how to breathe between edits. You light a lamp, you take out a fresh sheet, you begin drafting again. This one isn't a legal update, it's a plan. A strategy for inheritance, for witness acquisition, for scroll duplication in times of fire. You list names. You diagram relationships. You map out who owes you favors and who can be bribed. Then you write a sentence in the center of the page. If I disappear, this scroll shall name my successor. And you pause, you stare at it, you underline it. Because power doesn't live in titles, it lives in preparation. Outside, the rain begins again. You wake to bells, not the deep, formal chimes that mark an imperial death or a coronation, just the crisp triple tones of a document review session beginning somewhere in the northern court. You recognize the cadence. You've trained yourself to 1 bell for a ceremonial audit, 2 for an inquiry, 3 for an open session, when any scroll might be brought to the table. That means your name could rise today not as a warning, not as an accusation, but as a precedent. And that, ironically, is more dangerous. You've read the cases. When a woman's clause is cited to justify someone else's petition, it becomes public domain. It is picked apart, discussed, rephrased, and if it proves useful to the wrong person, your own words can be copied into another scroll, inverted, twisted until they favor your rival instead of you. That's how history works in the palace. Nothing is stolen outright, it's edited. So you rise slowly, roll your scroll tightly, and press it to your chest like a wound you've learned to carry without wincing. Breakfast is sparse, you requested it that way. Less food means fewer interruptions, and fewer interruptions mean more time for study. You sit cross-legged by your writing table and begin reviewing your personal archive, your own notes, Your copies, your side records, you've developed your own shorthand over the years, a hybrid of Greek, Latin, and memory. Tiny glyphs at the margins to mark phrases of interest, symbols only you understand. One means vulnerable phrasing, another means inherited clause, outdated. A third marks anything you suspect was dictated under pressure. You trace those symbols now, fingertip grazing the ink like a prayer. Then you make another copy of your primary scroll, not because it's at risk, because someday it will be. Everything is, eventually. You glance up at your mirror, not for vanity, for evidence. You look into your own face, trying to find the signs that others see the calmness they resent, the precision they fear, the unreadable expression they mistake for cunning. You've cultivated that face carefully. You don't let emotion linger on it, not even joy, especially not joy. Joy is easily revoked, and this palace takes pleasure in doing exactly that. There's a knock at your door twice, softly, not an order, a request. You open it to find a junior scribe standing with her hands clasped, scrolls pressed to her chest. She's barely 20, cheeks pink with cold or nerves. She bows. "May I sit with you?" she asks, and you hesitate for half a breath before nodding. Not because you trust her, but because you know this is the kind of decision that matters in ways you won't see until later. She kneels beside your writing table, unrolls her own parchment, and begins to copy silently. For a moment, the only sound is the scratch of quill on skin. Then, timidly, she speaks. "I want to draft my first clause soon, about my visitation rights to the ancestral archive." You nod. Good instinct. Archives outlive people. If your name appears in their visitor logs, it's harder to erase you. "Do you have counsel, you ask?" She shakes her head. "Only stories, mostly warnings." You study her, the earnestness, the still soft eyes. She's not built for this. Not yet. But she might be. So you take out a scroll, one of your practice sheets, and begin copying lines in slow, deliberate script, explaining as you go. "Always define your terms," you say. The court pretends words are fixed, but they evolve. Make sure your definition is the first to exist. She nods quickly, too quickly, but she listens. And in this place, listening is the first offense. As she copies, you catch her glancing at your original scroll, the real one, rolled beside you. "May I?" she begins. You shake your head, not unkindly, just firmly. "Not until you have one of your own," you say. She blushes, but she understands. Scrolls are not letters. They're not shared like stories. They are selves, private, protected, precise. If you let someone read yours, you let them know how to destroy you. She stays until midday, then leaves with a bow and a face full of determination. You don't ask her name. You'll learn it soon enough if she survives her first clause review. That evening, the sky turns pale silver. You watch from your balcony as clouds drift over the city like tired scholars, heavy with unspoken arguments. A servant brings you a note sealed in green wax. That's the color of informal counsel. Advice, not law. You crack it open. Inside, a single line, written in careful, looping script. Her new clause references yours in footnote. No name, no sender. But you know who it means. Theodora. You press the paper flat against the table and reread it 5 times. Referencing your clause gives her weight. It gives her legitimacy. And if her language echoes yours too closely, it could create a mirror one that confuses the record, splits the narrative, and gives her space to argue that you're redundant. It's a clever move. You'd admire it if it weren't aimed at you. You retrieve her scroll from your personal index, yes. You've kept copies of others? Of course you have. You unfold the last draft she submitted and scan for the footnote. There, buried at the end of the 3rd paragraph, in faint ink. See precedent established under ceremonial clause. 18b, designation attributed to consort Ika of House Niketis. That's you. She's used your full title, with reverence, with care, with the intention to claim compatibility. You lean back. In some places, that might be flattery. Here, it's assault. She's not trying to replace you. Not yet. She's trying to merge with you. to make her existence an extension of yours. That way, if she rises, you fall gently, slowly, with her holding your scroll like a twin she never invited but refuses to let go. It's bureaucratic mimicry. She's not your rival. She's your reflection built in reverse. You sigh. You reach for your parchment again. You begin a new draft. This one is short. It asserts divergence. It redefines your clause as singular in ceremonial precedent, non-transferable, and incompatible with mirrored references. It's an aggressive move, risky. But she made the first gesture. You sign it, seal it, send it. That night, you sleep with both scrolls beneath your pillow, your original and your response. You dream of ink that moves when you breathe. You wake to find the scroll warm again, like it's waiting. The next morning arrives, not with sun, but with fog thick and chalky, the kind that presses against the stained glass and renders the entire courtyard into a watercolor painting without edges. You sit at your vanity, unmoving, watching the world blur behind you. Today, something will shift. The way the palace holds its breath is a language you've learned to read better than any scroll. There's no chatter in the corridor, no perfumed laughter echoing from the bath halls, no rustle of satins against tile. It's the stillness that warns you now. You've made a move, and the court has chosen to wait before it answers. That's always the cruelest reply. Not denial, not correction, silence. You don't eat. You drink 1 cup of warm water with cloves and ginger. It sharpens your mouth and keeps your thoughts from clouding. Then you take out your claws again, not because it's in danger this moment, but because it will be, it. Theodore's footnote was the first ripple. Now the palace will begin asking questions not aloud, not directly. It will ask in paper, in protocol, in procedural loopholes, and when the record keepers begin to notice overlapping language between 2 scrolls, someone will call it an efficiency issue. That's the phrase they use when they want to consolidate 2 women into 1 spot on the roster without saying so. So you prepare. You draft another addendum, this one establishing exclusive ceremonial provenance, a term rarely used but legally airtight. It means that your presence in certain rituals is not just permitted, but required, unique, non-replicable. You reference the ancient fertility rite at the equinox, one where your role was to carry the carved olive branch and speak the closing line. The emperor himself had nodded when you did it. There was a witness, the master of ceremonies. You summon his name into the parchment, ink it in confidently, underline the date, the location, the gesture, ritual memory. You call it. The law loves that phrase. It makes bureaucracy sound sacred. But you don't submit it yet. Not immediately. That would seem reactionary. Instead, you make 2 copies, one to be sealed and hidden under your second cushion, and one to be delivered only if Theodora's next draft escalates. Because she will escalate. She has to. Mimicry is never the endgame here. It's the bait. If she mirrors you successfully, she becomes relevant. And once she's relevant, she can begin subtracting you line by line. In the afternoon, the Empress calls a gathering. That's rare. Not a celebration, just a summons. You dress plainly, as always, but wear a single ring, the one with a tiny carved quill set in ivory. It belonged to your great-aunt, a woman who spent 40 years in the palace and died with her name still in the archive. Though her body had long since disappeared into the eastern cloister, the ring says you understand documents, but you also inherit memory. Let them see it. The gathering is held in the atrium of painted birds, where sunlight slices through the mist like thin gold ribbons. You walk in third, behind 2 ceremonial wives, and ahead of the tea mistress. Your placement is intentional mid-tier, non-threatening, but clearly within reach of influence. You keep your gaze forward, your scroll rolled tight in your hand. As the Empress enters and sits on the elevated divan beside the scribe's perch, she doesn't speak first. The chief eunuch does. There has been some concern. He begins, and the entire court freezes. This is the voice of correction, the one that precedes revisions. Recent overlapping clauses within the ceremonial register suggest inefficiencies in function. There it is, efficiency, the word you feared. You breathe through your nose, quietly. He continues, "We invite any woman whose designation may now require clarification to submit her addendum within 2 days. Not must. Invite. But you know what that means. It's not an offer, it's a narrowing, and only those who respond correctly will keep their scrolls intact. The meeting ends as quickly as it began. The women scatter, murmuring like pigeons. You remain seated for a moment, then rise with control, every muscle a signature. On the way out, you pass Theodora. She tilts her head, just slightly, smiles. You do not return it. Back in your chambers, you retrieve the prepared scroll, the one asserting exclusive ceremonial provenance, and seal it in violet wax. You dispatch it without flourish. It is not a defense. It is a declaration. That night, as the palace quiets under the weight of its own calculations, you light 3 candles and unroll every copy of your clause. You line them side by side. You trace the ink with your fingers. You rehearse the phrases under your breath, not because you need to remember them, because you need to own them. Then you do something few others dare. You begin composing a witness log. It's not required, not standard, but it's allowed. You list every woman who has spoken your name in a positive context, every man who nodded at your roll, every attendant who bowed to your presence without correction. You write them down not to accuse, but to mark, to memorialize. If someone tries to erase you later, this list will stand like a line of torches in the dark. These people saw me. It will say, and no one objected. You seal the log and slip it into a linen pouch, tucked behind the iron brazier. In the early hours before dawn, a soft knock comes to your door. You know the pattern: 1 tap, pause, 2 taps. Internal court messenger. You open the door without surprise. The eunuch hands you a scroll. You recognize the wax before the signature. Green, with a stylized Pete, Theodora. You wait until the door closes. Then you unroll it. It's a response. Not to you directly, but to the ceremonial register. A draft clause. She's requested joint ceremonial positioning. Her language is cautious, but clear. She cites your clause by number, references shared ritual placement, and uses a phrase that makes your blood go cold: complimentary presence. That's it. That's her angle. She wants to be your counterpart. Not superior, not even equal. Just complimentary. It's genius, and it's poison. If the court accepts this, you'll be split. Every ritual you once owned will now have 2 faces. Your presence will be diluted, halved, translated into something ornamental, and ornamental women are replaced the moment they chip. So you don't sleep. You sharpen a quill, and you write until the light turns the misgold again. By the time the palace roosters cry beneath the arches of the stable courtyard, your addendum is already dry. It lies before you on the table, ink glistening faintly in the candlelight. Every line carved with a deliberate restraint so calm, it almost reads like kindness. But it is not kind. It is surgical. It is the slow tightening of a noose, word by word, around a woman who dared to echo you in law. You've written it in the oldest permissible ceremonial dialect, archaic, court-specific, and difficult to dispute without specialized knowledge. That alone will slow her. But the real weapon lies in the phrasing. The bear's function shall be defined by ritual origin, and not open to duplication under concurrent precedents. You cite 3 imperial edicts buried in the back corners of the archive, all validating exclusivity in lineage-based rights. You know she won't be able to access those records. They're sealed behind a wall of clearance codes you've been cultivating since your 3rd winter here. When the scroll's rolled, sealed, and handed to the inner court courier, you feel no relief. Relief is for amateurs. For those who think a day's good writing means a week's safety. You know better. You know that scrolls travel faster than voices, but slower than whispers. That means you have maybe a few hours before Theodora's name enters the conversation again. Cloaked now in the sanctity of cooperation, you expect her next move to be indirect. A mutual acquaintance suggesting a shared ceremony. A scribe recommending revision for clarity. Maybe even the Empress's clerk asking if you might stand beside Theodora for a ritual portrait. Just for the visual symmetry. That's the trick of this place. The most violent attacks arrive as compliments. You pace your room. The air smells like wax and ink and rain-wet stone. On your writing table, the witness log remains unopened from the night before. You glance at it, your own quiet gallery of loyalty, and wonder how many names still belong to you. Theodora moves fast. She charms in corners, in tea sessions, in corridors where law is suspended by proximity to fragrance and laughter. You've seen her laugh. You've seen the way it leans, inviting others to lean too, until she's surrounded by a flock of nodding heads who no longer remember what they were agreeing to. But you're not without your own nets. By mid-morning, you receive a note from Thecla, the elder matron who has survived 5 scroll wars and lost only 1. The handwriting is unmistakably angular, like the bones of a hand that has never trembled. It reads, "You were right to seal the clause in old dialect." The scribes paused. They're rereading edicts. You've bought time. You nod to yourself. Thecla doesn't offer praise. She offers temperature. If she says the court is holding its breath, then your ink is still burning. You decide to visit the archive again, not to check your clause this time, but to leave something, a third version, a fallback draft encoded, informal, but legally admissible if interpreted with the correct cipher. You don't bring it openly. You wrap it inside a hollowed prayer scroll, one used during fasts, thin as a reed. You wear a veil. You speak only to the eunuch on duty, and even then, only once. He recognizes you. Of course he does. You've been in the archive more than most nobles. He leads you to a quiet alcove marked for ancestral decrees, where you slip the scroll into a compartment beneath the name of your mother's sister, who once held a post in the Empress's retinue. This is what defense looks like here. Not blades, not barricades, deposits, copies, phrases buried in stone so deeply that when someone tries to remove you, they find echoes still murmuring your name 3 layers down. Back in your chambers, you find the ceremonial announcement nailed to your door. It's folded, ribboned in green. Green means integration. You don't open it. You already know. They've accepted Theodora's request. Complimentary presents. The phrase is now official. A new clause. Her clause. Approved. Acknowledged. And slotted beside yours in the ceremonial register. Not above, not replacing, but beside. And that more than anything makes your breath stutter in your chest. Because now she isn't just a rival. She's a reflection printed onto the same parchment. The scroll you wrote, labored over, revised for years, now has a shadow, an echo that speaks in her voice. That means every time your name is read, hers may follow. Every time you stand, she may stand too. You sit at your writing table and look at your hands. You don't tremble, but you don't write either. Not yet. You need to think. You pour a cup of fig tea, sweet, too sweet. You push it away. This isn't the moment for softness. Instead, you open your witness log again. You add a line. Theodora's clause was approved. I must fracture alignment, not revoke. Fracture. You need to split the perception of unity before it hardens. Before the court begins seeing you as a pair, a package, a joint presence. Because once you're joined, your worth is halved. You become interchangeable. And interchangeable women are reclassified, reshelved, and eventually rewritten as decorative. So you begin drafting your next move. A ritual, one only you can perform. You search your memories. What ceremony have you enacted that Theodora has never touched? What part of court life is soaked in your name and no one else's? And then it comes the morning rite for a consort's first miscarriage. You performed it 3 years ago, after a junior wife lost a child in her 7th month. You had no heir yourself, but your bloodline held the right. You lit the candles. You said the names. The emperor attended. You remember the way he bowed his head during your recitation. It's obscure, sad. No one talks about it, but it's real, and it's yours. You unroll a fresh scroll and begin composing a request to initiate remembrance procession for the quiet rites of loss, to be performed on the anniversary of the unnamed. You phrase it so delicately, no one can oppose it, not publicly. To challenge it would be to challenge grief, and grief is sacred. You sign it, you seal it, and then you add something extra, a copy of the original witness list from the last rite, proving that Theodora was not present, not because she was excluded. She simply wasn't invited. No one even knew her name back then. This will separate you, not loudly, but finally, you send it before dusk. And that night, you press your scroll against your skin again. But for the first time in weeks, you don't dream of ink. You dream of firelight, and your own voice, steady, whispering names the court has forgotten, names Theodora cannot claim. The morning after you submit the morning rite request, the palace wakes slowly, as if unsure how to behave. There's no announcement, no formal reply, no visible change in the air, but you feel it. The stillness is sharper, not soft like before, but taut, like stretched parchment waiting for ink. You dress without ceremony, your robe a deep, severe blue, and you knot your sash tighter than usual. The morning rite was never meant to be popular. It isn't beautiful. It doesn't invite court musicians or open garden spaces. It doesn't flatter. It grieves. And in the Byzantine court, grief is both a threat and a tool. You've sent a message, one more layered than any accusation I was here before her. I have suffered. I have memory. My scroll is not a song, it is an obituary. You know what you've done. You've positioned yourself not just as ceremonial, but as irreplaceable. No one approaches you in the corridors today. The other women pass you in silence, some with averted eyes, others with faces pinched in restraint. Not pity, not fear, but recognition. They understand that something has changed. A morning rite, once invoked, becomes part of the ceremonial calendar. It cannot be revoked without rewriting a woman's entire legal history, and that would be a dangerous thing to try. Even Stylianos, precise as he is, would hesitate to redact a rite bound in grief. It would stain his hands forever. You have maneuvered the court into acknowledging a loss they never wanted to remember, and you've named it legally. That's the oldest trick of all, make them feel something, then bind that feeling with the law. By midday, you receive word that your rite will be reviewed by the Empress's ritual board, a formality. You've provided every supporting document, dates, witnesses, the original incense formula, proved by the high priestess of the garden shrines. Theodora, of course, has never set foot in a morning procession. She doesn't know the rite's layout. She doesn't know the lines you spoke into candle smoke, or the silence you held after the final bell. There's nothing for her to echo, and that's exactly what you needed. Still, you don't celebrate. You copy your scroll again, this time with the mourning clause attached as a second ribbon. You write the words slowly, carefully, as if they might split if drawn too fast. Bearer is sole participant in the quiet observance of the unnamed. Rite confirmed by precedent and spiritual witness. You underline soul. You don't want this shared. You don't want symmetry. You want separation. That night, a gift arrives at your door, unmarked. Inside the box, a single spool of golden thread and a scrap of green silk, finely woven. You know what it means. It's a message, a peace offering. Green for Theodora, gold for acknowledgement. She's trying to soften the conflict to suggest alliance, shared presence, mutual visibility. Perhaps even a private agreement she keeps her ceremonies. You keep your mourning, and both of you pretend you're not standing on the same legal cliff. But you don't want peace. Not this peace. You want clarity, clean lines. And so you write a reply, not a threat, not a dismissal, a verse. The branch is only sacred if it bends alone. 2 hands on the candle make no flame. You do not sign it. You simply return it in silence, folded inside black linen. The following morning, your chambermaid finds you by the window, scrolls arranged in perfect lines before you. She says nothing, but you see her glance at the morning ribbon. She bows lower than usual. She's a young girl, born in the lower kitchens, never educated beyond the seasons and which spices stain lace. But even she understands what that ribbon means. It means the court cannot move you without breaking something sacred, and the court despises breaking things it cannot repair. Then, without warning, a messenger arrives from the Office of Ceremonial Protocol. You don't panic. You nod, take the sealed scroll, and open it by the brazier, letting the wax melt just slightly before pulling the ribbon. The message is brief. Remembrance rite confirmed. Exclusive designation granted. No dual presence authorized. You close your eyes. It's done. You've severed the echo. Theodora can stand beside you at festivals, in garden processions, in springtime rituals where flowers hide everything that matters. But she cannot follow you into grief. She cannot enter that space. You've carved a chamber in the palace that holds only your name, but you know she will respond. She has to. If she's clever, and she is, she will try to pivot, find something outside ceremony, something strategic, familial, architectural. That's what you would do. And so you begin preparing for that possibility. You enroll your lineage clause, the one that lists your surviving family members and their formal posts. You cross-reference it with your ancestral home decree, which grants your family access to 3 minor estates outside Nicomedia. All these pieces are dull on their own, but together they form a wall, and walls matter. You write again, this time, not a clause, but a transfer suggestion. You offer to host a seasonal vigil at the family shrine within the Eastern Villa estate. You know the court won't approve it immediately. That's not the point. The point is to place your name somewhere else, somewhere that matters, somewhere that smells like continuity. Continuity, after all, is the most overlooked form of power in this palace. Everyone's always chasing favor. You're building permanence. That night, you sleep differently. You don't press your scroll to your ribs. You don't whisper its phrases into the dark. Instead, you place it under your mattress, layered between cushions, protected by the brazier's warmth and the scent of ink. It doesn't need your body anymore. It has your voice. It has your morning. It has its own shadow now. And as you drift toward sleep, you don't dream of courtrooms or scribes or the look in Theodora's eyes the last time she tried to outright you. You dream of a candle, alone on a windowsill, burning quietly, and no one trying to blow it out. You awaken to a different silence, less tense, less political, almost domestic. It's the quiet of a court, unsure whether its latest battle has ended or simply paused. The morning clause still hovers like smoke over the inner sanctum, and for now, no one challenges it. You walk through the colonnade with scroll in hand, but folded rather than clenched. No longer gripping it like a shield, but cradling it like something that has earned the right to exist on its own. A few glances follow you curious, not hostile. Theodora's mirror clause remains filed, untouched, unamended. That's what tells you everything. She hasn't responded, not publicly, not in writing, and in Byzantium. Silence in the face of new legal precedent is the closest thing you'll get to surrender. But you don't believe it's over. Women like her don't vanish. They molt. By midday, the ceremonial board issues a supplemental statement. The rights of personal loss are not subject to conjoined participation. Language must reflect solitary designation. You smile, faintly. It's a footnote. Technically, but it's law. And it echoes your phrasing almost word for word. The scriptorium has absorbed your language like a body absorbs blood. It cannot now reject you without injuring itself. That's how you know you've moved from participant to precedent. Your name may no longer just describe a woman. It might now describe a process. Still, you're cautious. One clause does not protect all doors. You return to the archive by dusk with an updated lineage scroll, folding in the names of 2 younger cousins recently granted minor roles in the court apothecary. The moment those girls became visible, they became usable, and so you claim them as anchors, positioning yourself as a matron by network rather than birth. It's subtle, but necessary. You've learned the court prefers women with branches. A woman with no extensions is a flower. A woman with shoots becomes a vine, and vines can climb. The scribe who receives your amendment raises an eyebrow, but says nothing. He recognizes the pattern now, how often you return, how meticulous your wording has become. He places the new scroll on the stone shelf beside your primary clause and presses a thin slab of lead over the top, marking it supplemented, not superseded. That's important. It means nothing has been overwritten, only layered. Your strategy is not one of erasure. You build forward, not back. The next evening brings the inevitable shift. You are summoned not by the court, not by the empress, but by Theodora herself. An informal invitation, tea, in the Saffron Gallery. That's a trap. Of course, informal means no witnesses, no scribes, no parchment, just 2 women and the consequences of honesty. You consider declining, but you don't. Avoidance is louder than presence. So you go. She greets you with practiced warmth, gesturing to a table laid with too many delicacies for one meal. Grapes, sugared almonds, rose biscuits, all wrapped in the illusion of hospitality. You sit, uninvited to speak, and wait. She pours the tea herself. A statement, not a courtesy. I admired your handling of the morning clause, she says. You nod, nothing more. I hadn't realized, she continues, that the rites still carried legal weight. I assumed they were ceremonial. You tilt your head just slightly. They are until someone tries to step into them. The smile she gives you is elegant, but thin. She sips. I never intended to mimic you, only to harmonize. A lie, but you let it pass. You chose a powerful phrase, you say instead. Complimentary presence. It's clever. I thought it allowed space for everyone, she replies. Space? You echo. Yes, but not the same air. There's a pause. She doesn't blink. You wonder, for a moment, how long she's practiced that face in her mirror. You know yours has been rehearsed for years. Why didn't you ask for joint designation, she finally asks. It would have been simpler. You take a slow sip before answering. Because I don't want to be remembered next to someone. I want to be remembered as a sentence no one could revise. And there it is, laid between you like an open scroll. She nods. Once. Then we'll see who gets read first. She doesn't ask you to leave. She doesn't need to. When you rise, you do so calmly, setting your cup down without sound. But before you reach the door, you pause. Not for drama, for truth. You're very skilled, Theodora, you say quietly, but you still think this place rewards beauty wrapped in ink. It doesn't. It rewards ink that survives the burn. Then you return to your chamber and write a single line in your witness log. She has begun to understand the difference between being seen and being cited. The days pass slowly after that. Not uneventful, just quiet in the way winter creeps along a stone floor. Theodora no longer submits clauses referencing yours. She crafts new ones, unrelated, innovative, but ultimately disconnected. Her scrolls begin to float beside yours in the register, but they no longer try to link. She's building a name now, not a shadow. That's the best you can hope for. You attend rituals with new weight. Women nod as you enter, not with affection, with acknowledgement. You're no longer the clever woman who slept with a scroll. You're the one whose claws they whisper when drafting their own. Even Stylianos looks at you differently. Once, he smiled while reading your amendments. Now, he reads them silently, carefully, and stamps them without correction. That's respect, or fear, or both. And then, one night, you receive a new scroll. Not from the court, from the archive itself. A rare honor. It reads designation recorded in ceremonial registry as original precedent. Clause titled Irene's placement cited in 3 current drafts. You unfold it with both hands. Your name is no longer just your name. It's law. It's a framework. You close your eyes and smile. You wake before the light. And this time, there's no fear, no rush to find the scroll, no tug of panic at your ribs. It's still there, tucked in its linen wrap beneath the embroidered pillow, the seal unbroken, the ink unchanged, but you don't need to touch it. You know it's intact. It lives now beyond your chamber. It breathes in the archive, in the margins of other women's clauses, in the new language of legal scholars who speak your name, the way they speak ancient imperial decrees carefully, with measured reverence. Irene's placement, a term that once meant your fragile, sleep-bound defense, has become a fixed point in the ceremonial register. Your scroll is no longer protection, it is precedent. That knowledge sits inside you like the warmth of coals under silk, steady, enduring, quiet. In the bathhouse, women don't ask questions anymore. They watch. You move like paper too sacred to touch, and when you speak, they lean slightly forward, as if afraid to miss something that might later be cited. Even Theodora, her face still lovely, her posture still perfect, avoids your eyes now. Or perhaps you simply no longer need her to look. She's busy carving her own place in the register, one untouched by yours. The morning clause broke the mirror, and she, to her credit, didn't try to glue it back together. That, too, is wisdom. You both grew sharper because of it, but only one of you survived with her signature replicated in 3 other scrolls. You take your time with your routine today. Every gesture is a ritual now. Every fold of your robe, every stroke of your comb, every word you whisper to the ink drying on fresh parchment, it all carries the weight of legacy. You're not young anymore, not old either, but you've lived through 3 ceremonial reorders, 2 inheritance crises, and 5 shifts in the scriptorium's senior leadership. There were days when you thought you wouldn't last another week. Nights when your only defense was a single sentence etched in fading ink. And now, your clause is taught to girls newly entered into court service. You watched one last week, barely 15, trembling before a scribe reciting the structure of her own petition. She stumbled on the third line, and the scribe asked, "Where did you learn this phrasing?" Her answer came quickly. "I read the precedent set by Irene of House Nikita's. You were nearby. You heard it. You said nothing. But when you passed her afterward, you slipped a dried fig wrapped in violet cloth into her palm. She would remember that. And if she survives, she'll tell others. That, too, is how you last here. Through memory. Through quiet. You write less now, but with greater weight. Each scroll you send carries fewer words but more meaning. You don't waste syllables. Stiliano sends his junior scribes to observe your drafting sessions. To study elegance, he says. You find it ironic. For years, he eyed your scrolls as if they were errors in motion. Now, he files them with gloved hands. You've begun curating your archive, not just your legal scrolls, but the soft documents the notes pass between you and Anna, the annotations you made in the margins of other women's clauses, the ciphered symbols you used to mark your own thoughts. You're preparing it for a donation to be housed in the ceremonial wing for future consorts to study. It will not be public. Nothing in Byzantium ever truly is, but it will exist, and that is the only permanence anyone here can hope for. You speak less often now. You let others speak your name. That's the true mark of security, not how loudly you declare yourself, but how many mouths carry your clause without needing your permission. And when the Empress's secretary reads aloud the ceremonial schedule each quarter, you listen for the phrase, observance to be held in accordance with Irene's placement. It always comes, sometimes early, sometimes last, but it comes. You still sleep with parchment nearby. Old habits don't die. They fade into comfort. Your original scroll, the one you wrote trembling, fingers stained with wax and fear, is now wrapped in silver-threaded cloth and kept in a cedar box by your bed. You don't press it to your ribs anymore, but you touch it once before you sleep, like someone lighting a small lamp before closing her eyes. The palace has changed since you arrived. The air smells different. The girls walk faster, draft earlier, file with more precision. They whisper of codex strategies as soon as they arrive. The old innocence, if it ever existed, is gone, and part of you mourns it, but part of you's grateful. You helped sharpen them. You helped warn them. You taught them, not by instruction, but by survival. That was your greatest scroll, not the one filed in the archive, but the life you lived in margins, inked with patience. And when the fire comes, because it always does, you are ready. You wake to shouts one morning, just after dawn. Smoke trails from the scriptorium's east wing, a careless brazier, someone says, or sabotage. You dress quickly, calmly. You do not run. Women with fragile scrolls run. Women with clauses in triplicate walk. You pass a girl in the hall, sobbing, holding ash in her fingers. You place a hand on her shoulder. You tell her, if your name was ever written right, you can write it again. You mean it. You know it. Later, when the damage is assessed, the loss is staggering. Dozens of scrolls gone. Marriages erased. Property lines blurred. Titles rendered blank. And yet yours remains, safe in 3 separate caches, one in the inner archive, one buried under a floor tile you sealed yourself, one copied, in full, in a monk's personal diary, because he admired the curve of your phrasing. He called it the most honest sentence he'd ever read. You never met him, but he preserved you anyway. That night, you light a single candle. You unroll your scroll, not to check it, but to say goodbye. You have a new version now. Not updated, not altered, just retired. You fold the original carefully, press it between sheets of lavender parchment, and seal it in a box marked only with the letter E. It has done its work. It saved you. Now it can rest. You lie down. No document beneath you, no ink at your side, just the knowledge that someone, somewhere, is sleeping tonight with their first clause under their pillow, whispering its lines like you once did, long ago. And that girl, she'll survive, because you did. And now, as the candlelight grows tired and the corners of your room begin to blur into one quiet shadow, you let yourself drift slowly, like parchment falling from a desk. You've been awake a long time, not just tonight, but across years of watching, writing, waiting. Your body may not remember every name you outlasted, but the walls do, the scrolls do, the scent of ink does. Let that be enough. You were never loud, never the kind to dazzle a court with jewels or laughter, but you lasted. And in this place, that's the truest kind of beauty endurance without spectacle. You shaped the air without taking it. You laid a trail in language, not perfume, and someone, somewhere, even now, is whispering your clause under her breath like a prayer she doesn't fully understand yet. That's how legacy works in Byzantium, not in bronze statues or temple murals, but in quiet repetition. So tonight, let the ink dry, let the candles shrink, let the sound of distant footsteps become just another soft hum against the stone. You don't need to write anything else tonight. You've already been read, so loosen the sash around your waist. Exhale slower than you did before. Roll your shoulders, once, twice, then let them rest. Let your scrolls sleep. Let your name echo silently in the room behind you. And as you fade into sleep, picture a single line of ink across a golden ribbon, folded neatly, untouched by fire, untouched by time, untouched by hands that do not know how to hold without crushing. You are not holding on anymore. You are being held by memory, by silence, by something that cannot be undone. Good night, Irene. Sleep well. You've already won.